Hi, I'm John Connearn here with Neural DSP, and I'm here to show you the new CorOS 1.3.0 firmware update for the Quad Cortex. We've got a brand new looper, we have a freeze function, we've got 9 new amp models, 3 cabs, 8 modulation devices, and 4 new delays, as well as a ton of other functionality and UI features that we'll get into right now. So one of the new features of this update is that there's now a looper as part of the devices of the Quad Cortex. And to access the looper, you would tap an empty space on the grid, scroll down the device list until you find looper, click looper and then looper X. If you open the looper, you'll see that we have 8 controls corresponding to 8 foot switches on the bottom. Now, the first control, duplicate for A, that means that you can extend your looper as many times as you want, up to 4 minutes 44 seconds in total. The next control, one shot, would allow you to press it, and then that will mean that your loop is playing for the final time, and then it will end at the end of that loop. C, half speed, that plays your looper at half speed, and as another cool feature, if you record your looper with that engaged, you can then play it at double the speed by taking that control off. D, punch in, self-explanatory, touch that or use the foot switch to punch in. You can then punch in, overwriting all the audio of your loop, and then punch out for the rest of the loop. E, at the bottom left, says record, pretty self-explanatory that one, but if you aren't playing a loop and then you press record, that will start a new loop from scratch. However, if you're already playing a loop and you press E, that'll change to overdub, where you can then add as many layers onto your loop as you want. And then F, play, and also stop. The next one, G, reverse, that'll play your loop in reverse. And then H for undo, that'll undo your last step of the looper, but then if you want to bring it back in, that'll then change to redo, and you can click H again and that will bring back in the step that you've just undone. So this view of the looper is called Perform View, and then at the top you'll see there's an option for parameters, and you can go back to Perform by pressing the same button. But here in parameters, you'll see that there's a load more features that can make this looper really flexible. And in this first page of parameters of 3, you'll see we have playback level and overdub level respectively that you can alter, high pass and low pass filters that will be applied to your loop, not your playing, but the looper, and then a threshold. And that threshold refers to your guitar input signal for starting the loop. So on page 2, of the parameters of the looper, you can see that we have momentary and toggle switches for both record and overdub mode, as well as a sync or a free toggle for duplicate mode. Now this would mean that if you are on sync, then it would duplicate your loop from the start and not where you press the duplicate button. And then moving along, we have punch mode, which also has a toggle and momentary switch. And that would mean that if you're on toggle, you would press the punch mode, and then you would play and then press it to punch back out. But then if you're on momentary, you would need to punch in, hold it down, and then pull it off to punch back out. At the end of the second page of parameters, you'll see that we have a routing mode selection. And with this, you'll see that it's currently set to grid. That means that the Quad Cortex looper will behave as it would on the grid and as if it was on a pedal board normally. However, you can select it to input 1, input 2, return 1, return 2, input 1 and 2, return 1 and 2, output 1, 2, 3, or 4, output 1 and 2 together, output 3 and 4 together, and also to multi. And then moving on to the final page of parameters for the looper, you'll see that we have quantize and MIDI clock start options if you want to involve MIDI with looping. But for my demonstration, I'm going to keep it simple and just stick to the good old-fashioned pressing buttons and dials. Okay, so regarding the looper routing possibilities, I've made this patch to demonstrate how, if you went on your looper, went to the parameters, and then went onto page 2 of the parameters and selected input 2, that then sends the looper to this row here, row 3 on my quad cortex. And on row 3, I've added an EQ with quite an aggressive low pass filter on it. And this means that I can affect the looper's signal, but not my guitar's. So I'll do a demonstration of that and you can hear how it sounds. So one of the features I didn't talk about earlier with the looper is the feature called reloop. And that allows you to cut a loop at a section that you want, shorten it, and have extra possibilities with being creative with your looper. And to do this, you would play, press duplicate, and you can see now we have the option for reloop to cut the loop wherever I want. That will then shorten the loop and play it from the place that I pressed reloop. But then again, if you want to bring it back in, just press undo. And it goes back to normal. In terms of some extra features with the looper in Quad Cortex, you can assign it in stomp mode to a foot switch. Here, I've assigned it to Footswitch C. If you want to go back to the grid, all you need to do is press the up foot switch, and then that'll take you back to the grid. Another feature is that if you are playing a loop and you wanted to change a preset completely, but still keep the loop going, you can totally do that. In preset mode, I'll play the loop from this preset. And then I'll choose the preset that I want to go to, and as long as that has a looper in the preset, the loop will continue playing. Freeze is a device as part of the device list in the unit, and a way to think of this is essentially a picture of audio that stays there that you can then play on top of and be creative with. To get to the freeze device in the Quad Cortex, you would tap an empty space on the grid, scroll down the device list until you get to morph, and there you'll see freeze. And then if you open up that, you'll see that you've got a simple on-off. This can be assigned to a foot switch. As you see here, it's assigned to foot switch H. If I click that, it goes on and off. The way to use it is if you have a sound, turn it on and leave it on, and the sound will stay just going as you've set it there. And then to turn it off, it turns off that way. And to get a bit more flexibility out of it, you can adjust the momentary switch. So if you wanted to hold it down and use it that way, you can do that instead of just tapping it twice. But you can also adjust the attack and release. So the attack being how quickly the freeze comes in, and release being how quickly it dies off to silence after it. Then you've also got a dry gain as well as a freeze gain. So you may want to have your guitar signal on top of the freeze louder, and therefore you could bring the freeze gain down, or vice versa as well. And then to top it off, you've also got high pass and low pass filter parameters, which allows you to alter the sound of the freeze even further. As standard, the attack and release are set at 250 milliseconds, but say if I set the attack to around 1000, and same with the release, it then allows for more subtle freeze playing where it comes in and out gradually instead of being an effect that's very obviously on and off. Functionality adjustment of this new CorOS update is that parameters are no longer assigned to scenes when adjusting them in scene mode. If I open up this Dream chorus here, as part of the new update as well, you'll see if I change a parameter, it doesn't automatically assign it to that scene. Currently, I'm in scene A. But if you still want that functionality, all you need to do is in scene mode, tap and hold a parameter, and you'll see there, it's then assigned to the scene. And then if you wanted to undo that, all you do is tap and hold it again, and it prompts an unassigned dialog where you just select unassign. And as an added note, scene parameter assignment changes can also be performed regardless of the active mode. One of my favorite new features in this CorOS update is the clipboard, because this allows you to save a lot of time by copying and pasting devices on the grid. To do this, all you do is tap a device. Here I've chosen the new analog delay as part of the CorOS update. Tap the contextual menu on the top left and select Copy Device. Now this copies it to the clipboard, and you can also paste this to other presets as well. But for now, I'm going to paste it at the end of the chain, and you'll see at the top right here, it says Paste Device from the clipboard. You select that, and it's pasted in. Alternatively, you can also replace devices on the grid with this clipboard feature. And to do that, you'd select the device you want to replace. Here, I've selected the Dream chorus. I'd select the contextual menu on the top left, and you'll see, because I've copied the device onto the clipboard, Paste Device now appears. I'll select that, and I've now got 3 analog delays, because why not? There are now 9 new amps, as well as 3 new cabs in the Quad Cortex. So let's have a look at a few. So the first amp we're going to have a look at is called the Brit UBL Lead. Also included is a Brit UBL Lead clip, but for now, here's the Brit UBL Lead with everything pretty much at 12. Okay, so now let's hear that same amp with a bit more gain. Okay, and here is the Brit UBL Lead clip amp. So the next amp model we're going to have a look at is the UK C15. Now there are two versions of this in the new CorOS update. At the minute, I'm using the UK C15 normal, but there's also a boost, and we'll have a look at that too. And then in this sound example, I'm going to use the brand new Dream Chorus modulation, as well as the analog delay. Okay, and now we're going to hear the UK C15 boost model with the hot switch engaged. Okay, so now we're going to check out the US amps, and the first amp we're going to have a look at is the US Tweed Bass LED Bright Jumped. The next amp we're going to have a look at is the US Tweed Bass LED Bright model. And before the amp, I'm also going to put the new Chief CE2W chorus, as well as a bit of room reverb at the end. Okay, the next amp we're going to go through is the US Tweed Bass LED Normal Jumped model. And before that, I've got a bit of octave, and I've also pushed the normal volume all the way up to 9 to give a bit of gain. And the fourth variation of this US Tweed amp is the US Tweed Bass LED Normal. And for this, I'm going to put the MX flanger before the amp. And the final amp model we're going to check out is the US Prince, and then I'm also going to add to the end of it the slapback delay in mono. out 4 new delays. We have a slapback delay in mono and stereo, as well as an analog delay in mono and stereo. For this first example, here is the analog delay in mono, and then I'll change it to stereo so you can hear the width of it left and right. And here's the analog delay in stereo. And here's a sound example of the slapback delay in mono first. And here's a slapback delay also in stereo. There are 8 new modulation devices, and the first one we're going to have a look at is the CorOS engine. So opening this up, you can see there are a ton of parameters to adjust your chorus any way you want. We have mix, depth, morph, rate, even sync, so you can tap tempo the rate of the chorus that you want. A random feature for that bit of spontaneity, if you want that cool unpredictableness that chorus can give sometimes. Voice mode, full, thick, open and broad, as well as a sync for MIDI, if you're using that. I'm not at the minute. We have a delay at the top right there, as well as a general tone. But on page 2 of these parameters, we have a tone frequency selection. We have a drive, so you can add drive to the chorus as well. A low pass and high pass filter, a width, and a drive type, from soft, edgy, hard, and then drive off as well as a general output. Similar to the CorOS engine, there's also a new flanger engine as part of this new update. And as you can see, there's a lot of parameters that you can tweak and tailor to your sound. We have mix on page 1, depth as well, then rate with a sync feature where you can tap tempo in a rate manually. There's this THR0 option, standing for through 0, and that allows you to add a slight delay to your dry signal, which then gives an overall prominence to the flanger sound overall. There's a feedback control, as well as a waveform. You can choose all the usual waveforms that you may want to have with your flanger. You've got delay as well as duty cycle, and then on page 2, you've also got a skew parameter. You've got a resonance control from full, hollow, rich, and intense. And then moving on, you've got smoothing at the top, and then a color dial from natural, warm, dark, bright, sparkle, dusty, spiky, all the way to twangy as well. And then you've got a high pass and low pass filter as well to alter the general highs and lows of the flanger effect. And then you've got an intensity down the bottom there. And then similar to the CorOS engine, you've also got a drive type selection from soft, edgy, hard, or off to affect the type of drive. And then you've also got a width control as well as a drive percentage for the amount that you want to dial in. And then on page 3 of the parameters of the flanger engine, you've got a master output for that effect as well. new feature of functionality in this update is that you can hold the power button to now lock the touchscreen and the master volume knob. So if I went and selected that, you'll now see that at the top right of the display, there's a lock icon. And now, if I turn the master volume, it doesn't change the output. As well as that, if I went to select anything on the grid, I can't do that. But if you want to undo that, all you then do is hold the power button and then it unlocks and you're free to go. But after you've unlocked the unit, the master volume won't change until you've reached the previously set value, and then the master volume will change. When using the Quad Cortex as a USB interface, you can alter the signal sent to the headphone output. And to do that, you'd swipe down on the grid to get to the I/O settings. And then down here at the bottom, you can see there's a headphone select. It's on none as standard, but then you can select it to be sent to USB 1 and 2, 3 and 4, or both. And this now allows you to have more flexibility and control the audio sent to the headphones when using the Quad Cortex as a USB interface. You can now alter the LED brightness of the Quad Cortex due to this new update as well. And to do that, you go to the top right-hand corner of the grid, select the 3 dots, scroll down all the way to the bottom, select Settings, and then go from Device Options to Brightness. And then when selecting that, these 2 switches here control the brightness of the screen and also the brightness of the LED lights on the foot switches of the unit. You can alter whether the LED light of the tap tempo flashes or not. And to do that, you just tap the tempo twice to bring up the tempo, and then you can change the LED light, whether it's off there, and then it goes off. If you want to bring it back on, double tap it again, switch it to on, and then it resumes as it was. A handy little new feature as part of this update is that you can now bypass devices on the grid simply with a double tap, and then to bring them back, double tap again, and they're back on. A new feature has been applied to the output blocks in the Quad Cortex, where if you hold them, you then, alongside having options to alter the volume and pan of the output block, is now to mute that output block, and you can see a red line appears on the output, as well as solo, and a blue line appears. And you can have these individually or both together. And another point on this is that they can be scene assigned. So to do that, you would simply hold either mute or solo, and then the scene icon appears. And similarly, to undo that, hold it down and an assign prompt would appear, and then it's gone. And then you can also control these with expression pedals, so you don't have to do it with your hands. And in terms of I/O settings in this new update, if you drag down on the grid and select your outputs, in this case, outputs 1 and 2, you can see at the minute, it brings them both up at the same time and they're unpaired. And you can now pair outputs by holding down the outputs you mean to pair. And then you can see that you have universal controls for both at once. This is the same case for outputs 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, where the pair and unpair functionality is the same. It's worth noting that there are now options to mute outputs that you can toggle on and off for outputs 1, 2, as well as 3 and 4. And this is going to be the case whether those pairs of outputs are linked or unlinked. The tuner has also had a slight update where if you hold the bottom right foot switch to access the tuner, you can now see that if you tune, you can see the sent values above the tuner. And it's worth noting that when using the tuner, the main outputs aren't muted, but only the inputs going into the tuner. And this is because if you're using the looper, you wouldn't want the looper to go silent when you're tuning, so that can still play through whilst tuning. And additionally, inputs 1 and 2 can be used in the tuner simultaneously. A new sync feature has been added to all the modulation devices in Quad Cortex. And to show that, I've got the digital flanger here. And as you can see, the rate at the minute is at 50 Hertz when sync is off. If I was then to turn sync on, you'll see that if I tap tempo to 104, the rate of it now is at the tempo that I tapped. If I speed it up to 218, it syncs with the tap tempo that I've inputted into the unit. CorOS 1.3.0 is available as a free update for all Quad Cortex users. And for a full list of all the changes, features, and updates, head on over to neuraldsp.com/news. I've been John Connearn. Thanks for watching.